Well, I think we can get started for now, and anyone else who files in a little later, just join in whenever. Great to see everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Shane. I run the investor relations and events at 10 Capital Network. We're really happy to have Richard and Vip here from Faith Driven Investor and Faith Driven Entrepreneur. And they're gonna talk with Hall a little bit about the major trends in the faith driven investing world. So Hall, with that, I'll let you take it away.
Great, thanks, Shane. Appreciate Richard and Vip joining us today from the Faith Driven Investor, and would like to have them maybe introduce a little bit more about themselves before we kick off our program today. Those in the audience, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. We'll answer them as we go forward. But Vip, maybe we can start with you. Can you give us a little bit of background about yourself and what you're currently doing there?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having us here today, and glad to have a chance to talk for a little bit. Yeah, I've been with Faith Driven Investor and Entrepreneur for about a year now. And it's been a great time. I came from a background of the real estate investment industry and had started an event in Dallas, Fort Worth called the Lion's Den. It was a Shark Tank type event. We've seen about 60 companies pitch over the years. Been thrilling just to see the growth of this ecosystem of investments and entrepreneurship, especially with values-driven folks involved.
Great, thanks. And Richard, how about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Been with the Faith Driven team now since the end of May, which if you've been around the kind of Faith Driven Investor and Faith Driven Entrepreneur ministries for long, 4 months means you've been on the team for a long, long time now. It's
practically tenure.
Right, and it's growing like crazy. And I mean, just the Lord's been so kind. And I like to say we're building the plane and flying it at the same time. So I'm one of those who's kind of holding on for dear life, hopping aboard the plane. But I come from Dimensional Fund Advisors, which is a large institutional asset manager here in Austin, Texas. My bride and I live here in Austin, in the downtown area. Tiny little apartment, and we're venturing into the home buying sphere with everyone else and their mother in Austin. So wish us luck as we take on those waters. But it's been really sweet. I'm Austin born and raised, went to Baylor University in Waco, Texas, played some baseball there. And it's fun to be back in the hometown and now working kind of in this faith and finance ecosystem collision world. It's been great.
Great. Well, let's talk about that faith finance ecosystem. I'm seeing more and more of that pop up around the country, around the world, and I'd like to learn more about it. I know a little bit about it myself, but you guys are certainly been in it, involved a lot longer than I have. And so what do you see as the growth in the faith-driven investment segment? Where is it coming from and what does it look like?
Richard, you want to take that one?
Sure. I mean, it's a phenomenal question, Hall, and I appreciate that. I mean, it's happening in a lot of different directions, which is really exciting. And I think kind of for helpful context as to who we are, kind of helps position ourselves and where we kind of fit in the ecosystem. And I'll talk about it, kind of what's going on broadly, and Vip chime in at any moment. But, you know, we are a ministry nonprofit, faith-driven investor and faith-driven entrepreneur that seeks more than anything to encourage entrepreneurs and investors that are out there operating in a means that they try to act in a way that honors and values their faith. And so that is, you know, biblically responsible investing might be another term. Business as a mission, BAM, is a really popular term. And our heart is to kind of say, hey, this is a vast ecosystem. There's people in all corners of the globe who are looking to steward their resources in a way that maybe aligns with their faith, or steward their company and their positions in a way that aligns with their faith. So we set out to say, you know what, let's go encourage that marketplace. Let's go seek out and encourage that marketplace. And that's been going on for 3 years now. And it started as like a podcast, and then it grew into a blog, and a book was just written. There's a conference that takes place. And as about a year ago, Vip actually set out to say, you know what, let's start moving some dollars and cents. And let's see if we can't take our friends on the entrepreneurial side of the aisle and the investor side of the aisle and play connector. You know, we don't need to be compensated for our efforts. We're a ministry nonprofit that wants to see this kind of space served and encouraged and supported well. So Vip essentially created a deal flow catalog that said, hey, if you're an entrepreneur inspired by your faith, if you're a fund manager inspired by your faith, come post your deal here to our faith-driven marketplace. And then we'll put it in front of the investors out there that we know that are involved in this ecosystem, that are inspired by their faith. And what's been really fun is to just watch that kind of blossom and grow and turn into something where when people hit the fundraising trail and they're a Christian entrepreneur, they reach out to this ministry nonprofit and say, hey, I'm going to round up some some investors, and maybe I just finished my friends and family round and we want to bring on outside capital, would love to kind of meet those who are also encouraged and inspired by their faith and, operate in a way where their faith convictions drive that. And so that is kind of our little sphere. So more of the private investment realm, kind of, something, really well, Hall, with the 10 Capital. But then on a broader ecosystem level, there are so many people out there working in this space as it relates to mutual funds. And you've got Eventide, you've got Inspire, you've got Timothy Plan, Praxis Mutual Funds. They're all in the public equity, public debt sphere saying, hey, if we're going to go trade stocks and bonds of publicly traded companies, let's look at the one that maybe do so in a socially conscious manner. You've got accelerators like Praxis Labs and others. You got other organizations that are, ministry nonprofits like C12 and Convene and FCCI that say, hey, let's draw these folks together. And so we're just one ministry that kind of runs in the lane as well. But it's a growing ecosystem as folks look to say, hey, I'm inspired by the gospel view, and I want to implement that into the way I do business and the way I operate or the way I invest and steward the resources that I have. And that's kind of the 30,000 foot view of the ecosystem. Vip, I'll let you riff on that for a second.
Yeah, I mean, I think that about covers it. It's amazing what's happened in the last 10 years in particular, I think. Initially Guidestone was kind of like, as a mutual fund family, was designed just to handle the retirement plans of missionaries and the Southern Baptist Convention pastors. And then, a few years later, or a few years ago, they started being allowed to take those publicly and allow just the average investor to start investing in their the different mutual funds and ETFs. And so what started as just a church-related activity ended up becoming something on a much, much bigger scale. Now they manage billions. So more and more mutual funds and ETFs have been created just in the last 5 or 6 years, and some of them, the top 25% in their space. On the private equity venture capital fund side, a lot of people have been building funds in Silicon Valley and in Austin and in different parts of the country for years. We've discovered just in the last year, probably 60 or more venture capital and private equity funds that put values and faith is part of their, key tenets as they build their funds. Some of those are as small as, $2-3 million, which you guys might refer to as micro funds. There's some that are in that $25 million to $50 million range, based some of them, South Lake, Texas. And there's other groups that are in 400, million or more, looking at influencing economies and countries and those types of things. And so it honestly amazed me that was there. And then in particular, I got an email literally this morning from a guy in Singapore who just started a new accelerator. So one of the most encouraging things that's happened in the last few years is more and more business accelerators starting to help these companies grow and develop in different parts of the world. We're tracking at least 40 of those now.
Wow. Great. So what do you think is a primary trend in the faith-driven community these days? It's, as a group, it's emerging, as you're talking about, accelerators are forming, is growing. But what do you think is the main trend or direction that it's going in?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. Two kind of areas in particular. One is the challenge of how do you fund entrepreneurs where resources are few? There's places in the world, frontier markets, where there's a lack of resources, sometimes, gospel poverty we might talk about. And so a big part of this space is what they're using is moving from grant dollars that were, donated and given into those places to start investing in those markets. We're seeing some of the first $100 million, $200 million exits from African fintech companies. Whereas, years before, people were just donating money, to help, provide jobs and schools and those kind of things. So it's moved from philanthropy to investment in some of these frontier markets, and that's super exciting. The other side would be the up and coming, technology, things like crypto and blockchain, electric vehicles, med tech, AI, VR, AR, XR. I didn't even know all the R's when we were getting started with this. And so, just seeing that, a lot of people think, how in faith and investing, they're thinking like a coffee shop in Vietnam, which there are those that are doing kingdom work and stuff like that in a little cafe, just trying to eke out a sustainable profit and make an impact in their local environment. But we're also talking about cutting edge technologies, med tech devices, and electric vehicles that are literally designed to change the way that, these countries and even our own country experience transportation and SaaS and life sciences fields.
Great. And Richard, what would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think Vip hit on something really important there as he spoke to frontier markets or maybe underdeveloped places, places in need of resources. Whereas the classic grant-making 501c3 non-for-profit model, I mean, praise God for it. We couldn't be more for it. We work for a 501c3 ourselves. But that is more centered at poverty elimination, and let's go in there and address the issue and start dealing with the symptoms. What we see from an entrepreneurship standpoint, specifically as it relates to the investment side, is putting in place quality business for-profit enterprises in these ecosystems is a prosperity creation mechanism. It creates jobs, it creates for-profit returns, and it has a reciprocal effect in those areas. And so as you think about ESG funds in the public equity space, and you think about, that stands for environmental, social, and governance. And so, hey, I want an ESG fund that reduces greenhouse gas emissions. That's my conviction. I want to save the planet. There's kind of your environmental bucket. The social side, hey, I want a social impact fund that I know the public equity funds I'm investing in, these companies have really clean supply chains, and there is no child labor. There's no, just kind of chaos taking place in the supply chain. I mean, some dark things out there. And then the governance side of like, hey, I want to be sure that these companies are run in a really smooth way and that executives are compensated correctly, and that we all know that like plays well into how a company operates. So ESG investing is one way people are investing in line with their values in the public equity sphere. Take it back to the faith side and the prosperity creation and the private markets. It's kind of that bridged gap between, I've got my traditional asset allocation where I think of maybe being in a Vanguard fund or some type of ESG fund, and the kind of the Christian vernacular, maybe I'm a faithful tither and I tithe 10% and I give to Young Life and I give to my church and I give to some World Vision that gives money overseas. We're kind of in this interesting middle ground of, hey, how can we take investment capital and move it closer to the action that can create prosperity in markets and places like Vip mentioned, Africa, Southeast Asia, places where the gospel is not necessarily readily prevalent, like the 1040 window across the country. And so that is kind of the trend we're seeing, is folks with the resources saying, hey, let's go there and create prosperity there alongside the other nonprofits that are doing fantastic work. So I know that's a lot, and there's a ton to be done in the space, but that's kind of what we look at faith-driven entrepreneurship and faith-driven investing and kind of where it moves.
So in the ESG world, there's a move to create standardized metrics, and then there's a move to give preferential treatment financially to those who meet their metrics. And maybe the interest rate is going to be 2% lower if you hit your metrics, but maybe 2% higher if you don't hit your metrics. And so there's a trade-off between ESG metrics and the actual financial component. And that's a big challenge, trying to standardize all of those things. How does the faith-driven world map into that aspect of it?
Man, that's a really good point. Viv and I were actually talking about this the other day, is at the end of the day, we're still looking for, in this ecosystem, really quality deals. This is a for-profit investment space. So when investors get involved, their excellence matters. They're looking for quality investment opportunities. But at the same time, the other component of that is, hey, can we quantify impact? And yes, we are talking in a lot of ways, like a faith-driven investment could be environmentally based. A faith-driven investment, in my opinion, should also always be socially conscious and socially based. But in a lot of ways, the impact we're looking to quantify is qualitative. Hey, what is the spiritual impact on the communities in which you work in? Hey, is there a furthering of the Christian mission of the gospel? Is there a furthering of churches being planted by byproduct of quality business enterprises bubbling up in that area? And so in a lot of ways, these are qualitative ROIs, but then there's very also tangible ways to measure it, like clean water supply or renewable energy or things of that nature, number of people put to work in a certain community. So Vip, you want to hit on that?
Yeah, I'd say that pretty much covers it. I mean, it really comes down a lot to, obviously people are still looking at returns, right? I mean, any of these types of things, you're looking at that, how much, return you're getting back on your investment. As we said, these guys are still investors. They're often looking for a good deal. But, impact tracking, Yeah, I mean, jobs is typically one of the things we see biggest on the from the interest of the people getting involved. The other thing is just pursuing specific passions. Like, for instance, I had some really good calls in the last week with some folks passionate about that anti-trafficking space. And so they're going to think of, how many survivors do we get out of trafficking and into a job so that they can build a sustainable life, have a sustainable life for their family and not have to go back into trafficking again. And so, I mean, those specific passions may kind of track with different measurements for, those things. But it's exciting to see people with, they're instead of donating to a cause that helps that organization, they're investing in a company that may hire the survivors and give them an alternative, from the past that they came from.
Great. Well, stepping back into the bigger picture of faith-driven investment, what makes for a successful startup in this segment? What's the core criteria one has to meet to really be successful with investors in this area?
Yeah, we could kind of ping pong on this one, but I think, at the end of the day, excellence matters. It really matters if it's a good company. You got to be able to have the ability to generate revenue. You got to be able to quantify the impact that you're making. And honestly, a lot of folks like a veteran team. Somebody that's done it before, that's accomplished a task, or at least has some credentials that show forth the potential opportunity that there is. So, there are some folks who will say, like, God told me to do this, and so I'm going to go out and try it. And for those people, we definitely want to support them and encourage them. And yet at the same time, I think most of the investments are going to the people who have experience in the category, are already building or have built a product that really looks quality if you put it up against something similar. And disruptive technology, I think, is always popular, whether that's in the med tech space or other spaces.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it, Vip. I mean, we invest and serve a community that is values driven and is guided by the principles of the gospel. So that is a unique nuance to what we're doing. But at the same time, think of the sports metric. Like, let's look at a Christian university. Just because they're a Christian university doesn't mean they can go 1-11 on the football field. They're not a good football team. And so the analogy that I would kind of continue to use is like, in the same things that matter in just the normal day-to-day startup ecosystem, it matters inside of these founding teams and these startups. Hey, you got to have a clean cap table. You can't be overly leveraged. You got to have a valuation that makes sense. Don't come saying you're a $100 million business when you've yet to show us that you've got a revenue model that's sustainable. Something like Vip said, disruptive technology that can carry forward for a long time, that has competitive barriers, that keeps competition out. Doing something just unique in an area. Like, in a lot of ways, we see affordable housing situations pop up in a underserved community in South Africa. Like, to us in downtown Austin, that's been dealt with, and that's kind of, there's legislation written around that. Coming in and providing good quality housing is an amazing business opportunity in underserved parts of the world. It's like, that's a good business model, and we can get behind that. And it also creates prosperity creation because folks now have a place to live and more stability in their economy. So, I mean, it doesn't venture too far from kind of your classic rest of the world startup mentality is, hey, the founder and the entrepreneur really matters. Your subject matter expertise is really, really crucial. Your ability to go compete is really important. The fact that you're a believer is amazing. We hope we can encourage you from a similar faith conviction standpoint, but that'd be kind of my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I would just add to it, right? So in addition to the things we've said so far, we'd love to see the way that you treat your employees.
Yeah.
Are you doing it, well? Are you treating them with respect? When they go home to their families, are they different from the average employee that might work at a company that's not going to be expected to treat their employees as well? Whether that's pay or just the way that they're being treated and spoken to. The community that they're serving. Are you, impacting the community where the company is located for good or for not, right? And then, love to see, obviously, companies that are taking it to the next level. We refer to it as beyond. And that just kind of being, the opportunity to do something above and beyond what would even make sense for a typical business, out of the Bay Area or something like that, where it's like, hey, we're not only going to, build a great tech enabled service or product, we're also going to hire, previously trafficked women and give them jobs. And oh, by the way, we're going to do job training for them to make them better employees for us, but also future jobs that they might serve in. I mean, it's taking it to a whole nother level. Again, not all the companies will go quite that far, but we like to see at least some of those standards.
Great. Well, you have several programs rolling right now in this area. What is your participation so far? Can you break it down as far as investments and other activities you guys have going? Vip, why don't you go first?
Yeah. So a year ago, we started, about just over a year ago, right before our October 2020 conference, we started Marketplace. And the goal was to find about 50 initial deals for it. Amazingly, about a year later, thanks to some initial partners that would send us in deals, and now thanks to Richard's coming on too and building it out and scaling it, there's probably about 250 deals there as we've seen today, which is close to $2 billion worth of opportunity. Now, some of those are a couple $100,000 to invest in a frontier market, and others are 5 to 10 million. To invest in early stage technology, and a few of those are $200 million private equity venture funds. But as far as like the growth, we've gone to 0 to 250, 200 or 250 rather quickly. There were again no investors when we got started, close to 400 today. And really, probably one of the most amazing things is just 2 years ago when we got this conversation started, we'd had one event in Park Cities, Utah with about 100 people. Last year, we had about 2,000 tune in virtually for our faith-driven investor and entrepreneur events. But this year, just about 2 weeks ago, there were 4,100 from across the globe that tuned in and were a part of watch parties for the event. So the expansion of the ecosystem that's connected into this is just, it's doubled year over year, which is amazing. And then as far as like how many deals have been invested in and that kind of thing, I think Richard could update you there.
Yeah, absolutely. Per marketplace. So I mean, just once again, the tiny little sliver that our little ministry is kind of participating in right now in a much broader kind of faith aligned investment ecosystem. Inside a marketplace, we've probably seen, and it's hard for us to track because we're by design not a transaction platform or a crowdfunding website. We've probably seen 60 deals get done to the tune of somewhere between like 12 and $25 million, which is incredibly exciting. And that's just feedback we get from, hey, I'm a family office or I'm a member of an angel network. I used Marketplace and I found this wonderful, fitness franchise on there. Love what I saw. We actually ended up cutting a $250,000 check. And so that's kind of what our feedback loop looks like, as opposed to, we see dollars move through Marketplace. And that is by design how we choose to operate as a ministry. So, I mean, praise God for that. And just kind of our little sphere and ecosystem, that's what's taken place. But man, I think of I see Sarah Jennings on here, Beyond Angels. They're very much involved with the faith-driven investor ecosystem and world. And go look at what their angel network has done through Cedarville and the kind of the Beyond team. And they've bubbled up a sidecar and they've got different investment vehicles that are in motion, like what they've done. Look at the folks out in the Bay Area with Sovereign's Capital, and they've raised up a $250 million private equity, low middle market private equity venture capital shop. I think of Untitled Mutual Funds. They're almost a $10 billion asset manager. And so as you look at the kind of momentum in the space, it's really exciting. You talk to our founder of the organization, Henry Kasner, when he dipped his toes into the waters of this world 10 years ago, he kind of stopped and said, wow, we have a heart to invest and align with our values in the same way people have a heart to get out their pocketbooks and write checks to wonderful ministries and nonprofits and organizations. But it feels like the shelves of the supermarket are just empty. Where are the investment opportunities where I can align my Christian values with the ROI I'm anticipating? And what's taken place, and as Vip said, in the last 10 years alone, is just product after product has kind of bubbled to the shelf of like, hey, if you're a family office, here's private equity opportunities. Hey, if you're an ultra high net worth, really passionate about venture capital investing or want to be in an angel network, here's opportunities, here's organizations you can join. Hey, if you're the everyday kind of average Joe retail investor who likes to buy mutual funds and ETFs, that's bubbled up as well. So, I mean, the ability to generate ROI is out there. And you're also now starting to be able to do it in line with your values, kind of back to that ESG conversation. In the same way someone would want to do it that's environmentally friendly or socially conscious. Now you can do it, biblically responsible.
Well, and to top that off, one question maybe for the audience, but for those who might even listen to this in the future is, when you don't know about this, and you say that you're living and investing with your values, you can act in ignorance. But now that you hear about it, and there's an opportunity to know that opportunity is out there, does it feel the same to go back and have a conversation about your 401k or about the investments you're making in local deals and think about the impact that it's making? As one of the guys in our ecosystem said for years, he was managing people's money. And he said, they found out some of the index funds and some things they're investing in. Every time a woman in America had an abortion, he made money on it. Now that doesn't, whether you believe in that issue or not, he personally was also the chairman of the board for a local crisis pregnancy center that was trying to avert women from making that choice. And so he was, as he looked at his business of investing and how he led his investors to invest, he was making money on the same thing that he was spending his time in ministry averting people from. And he was like, this dichotomy is just too much. And so we might even say, hey, if you're, listening today or considering it, this may not be your set of values. And for that, no worries. But if it is, then would, consider some of the things that are out there available these days and take a look. It's worth looking at to consider, that there might be good investment returns and a significant positive impact from some of the opportunities that there are in the market these days. And at the end of the day, at least you might feel better about the where you're putting your money.
Cool. So for those startups that are listening out there, can you get a little bit more specific? How far along do they need to be before they will be successful with engaging the faith-based community in general? Do they need to have revenue? Do they need to have a product working? Do they need to have recurring revenue? At what stage do they need to be in before they would really have a good shot at raising funding?
You want to take that one, Richard, since you're leading that work these days?
I can start and then you can finish me off. It's a great question. And I would say it depends on the investor you're dealing with. There are venture capital firms out there that are willing to partner with pre-revenue, pre-product, borderline ideation phase companies that are in the pre-seed realm. And that's just the nature of that venture capital firm, is they want to sink in and they want to go on the long path with you. And man, if you've got a world-class idea and those are out there, I think those are wonderful opportunities for partnership. Now, with our specific marketplace, with the 400 families that look to Faith-Driven Investor and look to Faith-Driven's marketplace as a potential source of deal flow, the ones that gain the most traction are post-revenue companies knocking on the door of cash flow positivity, somewhere in kind of the seed to Series A stage, maybe Series B to that level of maturity. We run into a few of those. And they've got a proven concept that's working. And more often than not, they've brought a lead investor to the table of some sort of notoriety that says, hey, here's why I back these guys. I've firsthand seen the tangible nature of the impact they can make. Or I have firsthand seen and I have relationship with the founder, CEO, or the board of advisors, and they're just quality folks and they can be trusted and they're going to be worthy stewards of your investment capital. And so that's the ones that we see that come to marketplace and generate the most traction.
Viv, what would you like to add on to that?
I think that's summed up really well. One of the things we find, like, investment typically happens at the speed of trust, right? You trust that entrepreneur that they've got an idea and the ability to pull it off. And so, it helps when, there's revenue to prove it. There's, followers or, clients or, those kind of things that actually prove that the product or service works. And then you've got, if you've got other investors, other partner organizations and accelerators, something like that, that can speak to the quality of the person, the combination of those two things is this, phenomenal as far as like building trust and encouraging other investors to make it a quick decision.
Great. Well, to draw an analogy in the angel world, a startup, say in Austin, would go raise money from family and friends, and then they would draw the circle wider and raise from the local angel network, and then draw the circle wider and potentially go outside the state. And if you're raising money along the way, that process works. If you can't raise money from family and friends, it's very hard to raise from angels. And if you can't raise from your local angel group, you have very little chance of raising from outside the state, because no one wants to fund someone that comes and says, nobody back home would give me money. How about you? So how does that play here? Do you really need to have local support, or can you really just jump to any part of the community anywhere in the world and find that that's okay? You didn't raise money back home, but you can raise it over here because it's a great idea or whatever. How do you see the analogy working or not working like it did with the angel world?
I'll make one comment on that one. And I think if when Henry, our founder, saw the opportunity to build this, one of his real passions was what we'd say encouraging the 99. And that is, at Sovereign's Capital, they've had, 100 deals a week come in, right? And, but if you've got to represent your LPs well, and you've got get the best returns you possibly can, you can only invest in like maybe one of those 100 companies. So what we'd like to see it with Marketplace and in this ecosystem, we'd like to see that one, right? And sometimes we get those referred over that, the best of the best companies. But a lot of times it's the 99 that we're trying to encourage to help, get over this hump that they're challenged with currently, that they might get on and build a better company, do a better work, follow their calling to create. For some folks, they've grown up in an ecosystem or an environment. If folks went to Harvard, live in Highland Park in Dallas, you've probably got access to capital pretty easily because people who know people that could probably write at least that minimum check, and not only in frontier markets, but in a lot of places in America. People, not everybody's got a buddy that can write them a $15,000, $25,000 check really easily, or just the access to, to get in front of those right people. And so we wanted to make Marketplace a place to encourage that faithful entrepreneur who's working their tail off, trying to follow the Lord and what he's leading them to do, but also might not have access like everyone else does. And sometimes it just might not be someone that in your own country that gets your idea. We've had great companies from different parts of Africa, different parts of Europe come to us to raise capital because of something about their product, or that it had to do with the US markets and those kind of things, or maybe locally someone didn't see the value, but maybe someone from within the US or within our market did, and vice versa. So I think that definitely we're still looking for those great companies, but I think we're also trying to really serve, and that's because that's part of the bigger picture of faith-driven entrepreneur and investor, and that is to serve these folks that are faith-driven and equip them to do that even better. Sometimes that includes the capital. Sometimes it's a group, a conference, an encouraging conversation.
Richard, any thoughts add on to that?
Yeah, Hall, to your point on the couldn't raise the friends and family round, couldn't raise the angels round. I'm gonna go engage some family offices that I have no relationship with. Man, I think it's just so crucial that you find local support in some capacity when it's available. I think Bit makes a really good point. Like, let's say you're in an area in a part of the world where it's really challenging to be a Christian. Let's say you're in a part of the Middle East where that is not popular, and you've got an idea that could potentially generate good return, but also has in our vernacular, kingdom impact. Probably a strategic partnership would be somewhere in the West where Christian capital could come support you, pray with you, mentor you, and support you, because you're out on the front lines in an area where it's not popular to celebrate your faith. In that instance, in that situation, it makes sense. But thinking of if you couldn't raise and support locally and build that trust locally, how much harder is it going to be to go across the seas and build that trust from, culturals of difference. So that would be my kind of sentiment there is, we run into a lot of entrepreneurs in different corners of the earth, and candidly, we have to vet for just legitimacy and avoid fraudulent opportunities, because it's really easy to raise your hand and say, hey, I'm so-and-so doing this really good thing. And like, all right, hey, well then, do you know this local foundation that we trust is a really, really credible organization? And if you don't, that makes us kind of raise our eyebrows and say, well, can we trust what you're doing here? So that's not that we have to be cynics all the time, but as Vip said, investment moves at the speed of trust. And if you're someone a world away, probably need some people endorsing you.
Great. Well, if anybody in the audience has any questions, go ahead and put them in. We're getting near the end of our time. My next question has to do with globalization and how you handle that. In the U.S., most investors want Delaware C corporations. Outside the U.S., it's a very varied space, especially in Europe and Africa. They have different entities, different rights, and so forth. But at the same time, what I'm noticing is that these pitch sessions are easily held from around the world. I joined a Western Romanian incubator a month ago on their funding panel, and they look like any panel you would find in the Bay Area, Austin, New York. It's just, they're all in English, 3-5 entrepreneurs pitching, AI systems, blockchain systems, e-commerce, and so forth. And questions were all in English, and we were using Zoom tools and Mentimeter and so forth. So it all just looked like anywhere else. But when it comes to investing, questions start to arise. Who's going to monitor that company? Because I'm probably not going to get on the plane to Western Romania every month or every quarter for a board meeting. And who is actually going to be, what legal structure are we going to use? So how do you handle the globalization aspect when you get down to the nuts and bolts of investing? Vip, how do you approach that?
Yeah, I'll give an initial response and then let Richard kind of take it from there. I would say, a couple initial things. One, having the global accelerator network has been very helpful, like Richard said, for vetting deals and people and that sort of thing. Because it's great to know that there's someone working with that company in another part of the world, or that they can support. Another thing, and it's come up even in recent days, is like, hey, this sounds like an amazing deal in Kigali, Rwanda. But is there a local investor in Kigali, or someone, there's an expat even in Kigali that's willing to make that investment and be there for the 4 a.m. phone call to help solve a problem if something comes up? Because with the time change and all those other things, you just might not, be able to get in touch with the investor here locally. And so, that's come up, and we're seeking to continue to grow those relationships. I'd say, amazingly, the Lord has been very generous to give us some good relationships globally that allow for a lot of that to happen. But there's definitely still parts of the world where we couldn't just immediately have a problem solved for that. So that would just be on the relational side of things. As far as the how the money is moving, I would say, I can comment on one and maybe let Richard comment on the other. A significant portion of investment in this space initially was in the donor advised fund portion, which is more, investing out of a pool of donated capital. And so sometimes that money is, there's some organizations that are very, very professional at helping to make those transactions. Impact Foundation, NCF, and a few others are trusted advisors for moving that kind of capital and taking care of the diligence issues. Richard, you want to follow up on some of the other pieces of that?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Local subject matter expertise is so crucial. When we venture into the African kind of realm of entrepreneurship, we're going to start asking if Synapis and Triga or the Mergon Foundation has connections to these entrepreneurs, or are they, 1 degree removed? Because that is so crucial. If we're going to get involved and we're all going to kind of pull from the same end of the rope, there's got to be such a deep level of trust. And so if your heart is to invest overseas and you expect to see dollars come back, this is not writing a, tax deductible contribution where you never expect to see the dollars again. If your heart is to see dollars come back, then I would just challenge you as the investor to go create an intimate level of knowledge and understanding and relationship. And, you know, it probably because the reason you're getting into this space in the first place is you truly care where your dollars go. So go find out, go do your due diligence, go do your research, go do your understanding, go understand the kind of, Hall, to your point, the legal mechanisms of how dollars need to move in that local area. And that'd be the point I would make.
Yeah, I'll add a last thing onto that. And that is, you know, one of the things that we've started, we do faith-driven entrepreneur groups. So an 8-week study for entrepreneurs to go through to get to know more about, you know, their calling, as well as, you know, get to know one another. We do those as well for investors. So for accredited investors who are really interested in engaging the space, you know, and so sometimes when 10 or 15 of those folks get together to work through one of our courses with one of our trained facilitators, you know, it allows them to have conversations with the other folks in that group about, hey, have you made, you know, these kind of investments before, and really have a lot of group sharing and group think around, you know, successful ways that have been done. So I think that's one of the biggest things, is just the ability to have, you know, a network of folks that have been there and done it to kind of pull from their, you know, information base.
And are those groups easily found? Are there syndication groups where they come together around a particular thesis or region of the world, and then you can join those groups? I know many investors were more likely to invest if they're with a group of others and everybody is sharing the diligence and the deal flow and so forth. How well developed is the faith-driven community in that direction?
So there are some angel networks. Like we said, Sarah Jennings is on the call today with Beyond Angels. There's Ambassadors Impact, which is an angel group here in DFW, and others. Those are, we do not, FDI does not operate any syndications at this point. And to my knowledge, there's no plans for that. So it's more groups designed for investors to just engage, you know, content about walking, you know, heart posture and, you know, processing kind of what they're feeling like they're led to do. And then an opportunity to just kind of share with one another as they get to know each other, going through that kind of 8-week, hour-a-week process. It's not designed necessarily to be a co-investing, you know, product at this point.
Mm-hmm. Richard, anything to add on to that?
I mean, I think if you look at the faith-driven investor, faith-driven entrepreneur ecosystem, oftentimes, I mean, it might sound corny and cheesy, but we say, hey, this is a movement. You know, this is a global movement that's trying to start a conversation around the globe that, hey, you don't have to disconnect your Sunday worship from your Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. That can all be an integrated thing. And so where that starts is not necessarily by getting the pocketbook out and by structuring funds, but that starts, hey, right here in the heart posture of how do you conduct yourself at work? Who do you surround yourself with? What is kind of the bigger picture goal of your investment portfolio and the way you're going to run your business and treat your employees? And so I think that is the faith-driven approach is, hey, we want to cast this vision and start this conversation broadly and ignite momentum and bubble up excitement for people to get involved and say, man, I'm in. I love that. I'm an entrepreneur in Australia and I want to start something that, you know, that the Lord smiles upon when he sees my business, and that it gives him favor and it gives him pleasure. I'm an investor in Rwanda and I want to move dollars in a way that I think is truly stewarding them to the best of my abilities. And then from there, let our ministry be someone you lean on to for, hey, that started inside of me. Where can I turn next? What other great organizations can you connect me to? What angel networks could you connect me to? You know, here's my startup. Could you help me think about what investors could potentially come on board that are locally in my area, or maybe someone in the States could get involved? And so I think we kind of work at the top of the funnel, get the conversation as far as we can get it going, spread it out, bubble up momentum, and then from there, give people really actionable next steps. And that typically looks like plugging into community and getting the conversation going locally.
Great. Well, I appreciate you guys both being here. Can you give us a few final words that we could use to wrap up with? Vip, any closing thoughts there from your side?
Yeah, I would just say if this is a space that you're interested in, I mean, one, check out the Faith-Driven Entrepreneur or faith.org or faith-driveninvestor.org websites. If you want to do it in person with folks, you know, there's events this fall. Beyond Angels is having an event even in DFW. So if you're a Texan, the Lion's Den has an event in Birmingham, Alabama this fall. and quite a few live events in early 2022 with Praxis and Ocean Accelerator and other groups. So, find a group locally in person and get to know some of the great folks in your neighborhood that are passionate about this stuff. We're not the only game in town, and we're excited to have partners all over the globe. So
Great. And Richard?
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to get overly preachy here, but I think the whole reason this exists in the first place, and kind of like our big why, is, that the gospel of Jesus Christ has radically altered anyone who kind of works at faith-driven entrepreneur, faith-driven investor. And then what they've seen from there is that, man, this seems to be a part of the world that isn't ministered to very heavily. And the Lord actually has a ton to say about money and stewardship and how we spend our times. And we spend a lot of time working. And so our heart is to say, hey, we have a gospel-informed view of that. We don't care who gets the credit, but we think it's important and we think it matters. And so that's kind of the direction our ministry is sprinting in. And we're trying to bubble up a few solutions that work. And I mean, running into folks like 10 Capital Network, you, Hal, are just like such a deep source of encouragement to us, and just the way you're doing things and connecting investors to entrepreneurs and serving entrepreneurs as they go through a critical time of the fundraise component. And so it allows us to sit at a lot of really special tables. And so very grateful to be involved.
Great. Well, I appreciate you guys joining us today and sharing this with us. We'll share this with the rest of our network and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon as the community grows and progresses, and check in from time to time to see how the trends are checking and going forward. But I want to thank you guys for joining us today, and looking forward to next steps.
Thanks, Hal.
Very much.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks much. We'll close it there.